Okay, I just read one section that was 5 pages. This book is a lot more sections that are shorter in it. Um, and this was specifically about ignorance, which is fascinating to me in, again, so much of what I'm encountering in Buddhism, and I've encountered a lot in my life and travels, I've encountered a lot of Buddhists and Buddhist teachings, I suppose. Um, and I said last night I came to believe in reincarnation 5 years ago. I first heard of it when I was a teenager, and I was very like, "What? You don't actually believe that shit? I mean, do you believe you've lived multiple lives before?" And one of my good friends at the time, a great teacher who is no longer in my current reality, she was like, "I can't put that into words." She couldn't even answer yes or no because she thought it would greatly diminish the experience. Um, but ignorance is something that I feel like we do to ourselves all the time. If you're ever talking to someone and they ask you something about yourself and you stop and you go, I don't know. Whenever I have that conversation with someone and I see them do it, it just drives me nuts because it's like I see a part of them disappear inside of their eyes, like they've just hidden something from themselves. If you ask the question in the right way and it brings them up against a mirror and they're like, I don't know, and disappear. I find that I've been doing that a lot in the last year. I started this new year with taking some drugs with some kids that were all about trying to like manifest things and the law of attraction, multidimensional stuff. And I found that I was doing that. I found that when people were asking me pointed questions, I would say, I don't know. And I was like, man, I am stuck in my misery and loneliness and my reasons for sorrow. What bullshit. Fuck, how did I get locked in here? Ignorance. Ignorance is not bliss. That's a lie. But it can work if you're ignorant enough. It can work for a while. It's, so today earlier, anyway, so I guess I wanted to stop right there because this was really firing off the thing that I forgot to talk about last night that I wanted to talk about, which is writing, in case I forget it again today. And the other thing I thought of, which I wanted to talk about, is misanthropy. But the ignorance thing is interesting to me because there are so many moments we choose ignorance, and she's specifically referring to the ignorance of the Noble Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths, which is dogma because you have to learn it through someone for it to mean anything like that. Of course, what she talks about is, I mean, she reiterates this over and over and over again, is that you shouldn't believe anything she says or anything Buddha says. You should really discover it for yourself, but the Buddha tells you what it is you could discover. And I get it, like everything in Buddhism resonates as true with me. Not everything she says resonates as true with me, but everything in Buddhism resonates as true with me. And I do like a lot of her attitude and her, I do like a lot of things about her. There's things that really trigger me. And again, there's a type of morality. One of the things I found very poignant this evening was the idea that you can't have this pure life and pleasurable sense contacts all wrapped up in one nice package. That I think I was living as a hedonist for a while, and it was fun, maybe. I mean, I was still suffering all the time. But the hedonism itself was not directly causing me pain that I knew of. It probably was, and I was just ignorant to it. But in the last few years, it's become excessively poignant. I cannot be ignorant to it, that indulging in pleasant sense contacts mostly just causes me pain and suffering, emotional or physical, in lots of ways. So this idea of purity, like the idea of generating a pure heart or purifying my heart or purifying my mind, purifying my body, which is something that I felt like was a good thing to renounce, the idea of being attached to purity. Now I'm like returning to this idea of like, oh, purity. So, the petty purity that I was worried about, like eating organic, which I do think is a very good idea to eat organic still, but being attached to it's not such a good idea. Like that I was able to let go of. I was able to let go of my beautiful long hair, but see, it's just grown back again. So there's still these, but I'm no longer as preciously attached to it, which is an important distinction. But I'm aware. That's what the last seated retreat thing, silent retreat, did for me, was made me aware of all the choices I had made to be ignorant of the truth in my life and in reality and in interactions and relationships in order to have satisfying human interactions, which is the way I keep looking. All right, I've always thought of it in my life. Like, in order to have satisfying human interactions, you need to be ignorant of the truth of the situation. Um, I heard a story today of a friend's, one of a friend's friends died while watching NASCAR on TV. And my initial response to that was, God, what a fucking mind-numbingly horrible, boring life to die while watching NASCAR on television. I've always been really reactionary against having a normal, boring life. Like, when I was younger and people would be like, what are you most afraid of? And I would say, like, living a boring, normal life. That is what is most frightening to me. Yet at the same time, I romanticize today a man who plays piano for himself as a private pleasure, as a meditation, as a way of working out. I assume, I mean, he's really not that articulate about it, and I romanticize him, and therefore I make up lots of things about it. But that, this whole cloud, this whole pink sparkly cloud surrounds him, and has since I've known him, of romanticism, and the idea that, like, oh, a man who keeps to himself and isn't about showing off on Facebook and isn't about being a sex object and isn't about proving himself. I mean, there's lots of things about him that annoy the fuck out of me in the exact same vectors. The exact same vectors annoy the fuck out of me. But that I can romanticize that kind of, like, the private pleasures, private disciplines, although he's not all that disciplined. Man, I am jumping around here, but that's the nature of ignorance as well, is that when you riddle your consciousness with holes to keep the story going with the magical power of ignorance, then it makes everything difficult to pin down. I think people probably have more organized systems of ignorance than I have, because everything in my life is not very organized. You see all these nice books on the shelves, and then all these other things in front of the books. I put all these books on the shelves when I moved in no particular order, just to get the books on the shelves. And I was like, I'm going to take them all off and reorganize them. And I keep thinking about that, and I still haven't done it. No order, just stuff. So let's get to one of the triggers that I feel about these Buddhist teachings that keeps coming up in me, is that so as a kid, I was made to believe, or I believed myself and was made to believe often, that I was wrong, bad, somehow like an antichrist, some alien, somehow different than everyone else, in a bad way, in a wrong way. And as I grew and learned concept and words and relationships to other stories, I identified myself as a misanthrope. And, like, a quote that I quote often is that Krishnamurti quote of, "It is no mark of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." And you say the world is sick, and I say, tell me what that makes us, darling. I do, to a great deal, believe that pretty much everything the world offers is stupid. When I say the world, I don't mean nature, because I find nature, like, kind of endlessly fascinating and beautiful. And when I think of an existential reason why I reincarnated, it was to enjoy nature and somehow correlate that, connect it into society, like bringing, because you can't escape society when you go out into nature. There's satellites and fucking airplanes everywhere, and pollution, and acid rain, and the ice caps melting, etc., etc. There's no protection. So there's a part of me that, in the frame stories, believes in this realm and wants to protect it, and likes the idea of being a certain type of nature savior to somehow, I don't know how I'm actually manifesting that in my actual real life that I'm living right now. Trigger words for me. Um, but there's a part of me that believes that nature is beautiful, and the world, however, with its start a business, start a boutique business, make a lot of money, get investors, and buy a house and flip it over and have some kids and buy a fancy car and get a newer phone and a newer phone and a newer phone. Look, I have the newest iPhone right now. I have the big one. I have a microphone I bought, and I have books and salt lamp. I have stuff. There's some stuff I'm seduced by. And the weirdness of, I'd say the most seductive thing in my life has been sex. And in the last few years, I've just completely changed my brain programming, where for a long time I would romanticize my attractions. I would look at beautiful fat old men and be like, they are beautiful. Do you see how beautiful they are? Nobody understands how beautiful they are. So I was telling myself these stories to coat that seed of delusion with beautiful pearlescence, so it made this gorgeous gem that I could wear. But I've started stripping that away over the last few, I've been stripping that away over the last few years. So now when my body is attracted to the men I'm attracted to, I just look at them and I'm just like, today I was like, well, there are fruits that have been picked and look delicious, but they're just for eating, and if they're left on the shelf, they just rot. Oh, that man is way past his prime. Look at all the mold and bruises and he's wasting away. Flesh, fruits. The attraction to these things is not nourishing at all. And I've identified now at this point that I'm just like, these people just cause me sadness, misery, dissatisfaction, frustration. I can pour tons of energy into them and get zero back, except momentary distraction, because I've now programmed myself to believe like I'm never ever gonna get what I want from them, which is a gigantic litany of things that I have identified over years of like, this is what I really want from a man. That whole path is ignorance, and I'm totally aware of that. But we'll get back to misanthropy, which is what I wanted to address. Was that one of the things that's really triggering me about this is it sounds that I was identifying myself when I was young as being wrong and bad, and when I identified myself as a misanthrope, it was like, I am fucking Antichrist. I'm a misanthrope. I hate humanity. I hate everything about this stupid world. I don't know what to want from this world. I really don't know what to want. Why? Nobody has it. Anyway, John Grant reference, not necessary. And I don't want to waste time siding with hating the world. I think that that's a pointless waste of time. But when I look at so much of this Buddhist stuff, it's just like everything in the world is suffering. You're never going to get what you want. Everything's insubstantial. And it's the exact same thing that led me to feeling like I was a misanthrope. That I contextualized in the way that I could contextualize with the experiences and understandings I had at the time as a kid growing up in rural Indiana. Like, I just, uniformly hated the world. It was very important for me to travel the world so I could stop hating the world, because I could see that there's billions of different things happening in the world, and it's not all worth hating. And, most people aren't malicious, horrible, evil people. They just do what they do out of ignorance. They don't know, like, when people talk about most people think they're really nice people. They don't know they're racist. They don't know they're bigots. They don't know that they're just filled with so much hate and fear. They don't know that. They're totally ignorant to it. One of the examples I give all the time is, if you were to say, like, are you fans of child torture? Like, do you like the idea of a person being born and spending their whole short life like as slave labor so that you can get a good deal on shoes at Walmart? And people will be like, no, that's horrible. And I'm like, then don't fucking shop at Walmart. You're making it happen. And they're like, well, ignorance. It happens all the time. You do it every day. I do it every day. Everyone does it every day. And we can have our walls of truth. But until we're totally enlightened, we're still constantly playing the ignorance card all the time, the Joker card. It's wild. You can apply it to anything. It's amazing. So I'm being triggered by this Buddhist doctrine, which seems so rooted in what I have identified as misanthropy, of just being like, well, the world's so dissatisfying, so let's just abandon it. Let's just abandon it. And especially this Theravada path, the way Ayakema is expressing it, is so much about just getting the fuck out of here and stop the whole cycle of rebirth. In all the frame stories, she makes a point of that. She's like, any birth in any realm is going to be filled with dukkha. It's all going to be unsatisfactory, impermanent. It's just going to be like that all the time. I don't know if that's true, because I'm not enlightened and I don't remember what it's like to live in the other realms. I'm sure I have. But I don't remember right now what it's like to live in them. And even in this realm, which gets back to this, that in believing that I'm bad and wrong and all those things, I've always felt guilty about witnessing people who don't hate the world earnestly trying their best to get along, be happy. Some of them look like they're doing it better than others. We all know that there's a whole bunch of false fronts. But do you yourself believe that there are people that are mostly happy with their lives? Mostly happy? Not everybody who dies a happy death is a meditator. There are some people who live a life of being at peace without meditation. They just have some other kind of understanding that perhaps isn't based on ignorance. Perhaps it's based on some kind of transcendence that doesn't follow any kind of dogma. Or it may be a transcendence that's true and radiant and translucent, and they could call themselves a Christian or whatever the fuck religion, or not a religion, obviously. Because, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of people who call themselves a Christian or any specific sect of Christianity really just pick and choose what aspects of it they're paying attention to. And so every religion becomes our own expression. It just becomes a language to talk about the unknowable. It, of course, is super problematic when it gets dogmatic, ignorant, and hateful. But the people that I'm talking about are the ones that aren't hateful, that aren't just looking like they're suffering all the time. And regardless if they call themselves Christian or Buddhist or nothing, they have peace in their heart, in their eyes, and can carry that and live with it anyway. So I've always admired these people and thought that that is a good goal. I still think it's a little foolish to try to just reach enlightenment and become birthless, deathless, so that I never have to be reborn in this realm. Because I don't know, there's a weird logic I have here that I'm just like, we already are enlightened. We don't need to work on being enlightened, because there's a part of us that's outside of all this ego shit that's totally enlightened and doesn't need to try. There's no try needed. But the game of being a human and doing it well, living in love and peace, I mean, that's a good goal. I would much rather do that than constantly be obsessed with this dissatisfactoriness. So there's a strata of Buddhism that is really this Buddhism that's striking me as these are people who are hung up on how dissatisfying everything is. And there's another option besides renouncing everything and just trying to, dissipate into the oneness. And that is accepting the transience without attachment, with love and compassion and presence and I guess like clear. It still has it like the concepts in my mind make sense, like non-attachment, like a detached witnessing. But it's strange because this concept I have about people who are really happy and really at peace, it's like a fairy tale because I don't actually know any of them. It's like this concept I have in my mind that I'm like, sure, they exist. Because I know that I felt guilty about my parents when I was a teenager, and I was like, fuck you and your whole fucking stupid life. I don't want to be a fucking part of this fucking world. And then, like, every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, but they really believe in their lives, and they're really trying to do the best they can. And I'd feel so guilty. But they, when I test them against this ideal of the peaceful person who's in love and have peace in their heart, they're not. Neither of them are. And again, that's not their fault. That's like every person. It's not a fault. And the people that I know in my life that are good people, they have a lot of ignorance in them. The ones that are at the most peace that I know in my life, they're not at total peace, but the ones who have the most peace are the ones in my life. They use the ignorance thing a lot. I know they do. And again, is that a bad thing? I mean, what is the price of ignorance? Is it, forcing children to spend their entire lives working in sweatshops for you? Is that's an example of the price of ignorance on this realm that we can apply? The price of ignorance is filling the ocean with trash just so you can have a convenient plastic water bottle anytime you want it that you can just throw away and not have to worry about caring about or taking care of. I mean, there's like a nice convenient ignorance thing, like of just getting a sandwich at McDonald's or any place, and it's filled with shit that's giving you cancer, but it's convenient. The ignorance thing, like this. So there's applicable things in this realm that talk about the price of ignorance on a physical sense realm thing. But again, nobody gets out of this life alive, so there's another aspect of, like, if you're just at peace with everything as it is, then you die when you die, and it's bad. Who cares? The whole thing is still very confusing to me, and if I were just meditating 2 hours a day and doing my mindfulness practice all the time, but I am being patient with myself, in that I have known about this for a long time, but have never been this disciplined, and have really been much more focused on beating myself up for the last 4 or 5 years than healing myself and purifying myself. So I have to build up some more inertia of the healing and purifying thing before I can expect it to be what I'm mostly doing. And I've changed a lot, I would say, in the last few months. Then, so I can be like, pat myself on the back about that, but I'm still not. Like, I'm still kind of like not meditating 2 hours a day. I've already let go of them, but I'm still doing I'm doing something every day. And right now I'm doing these writing and speaking, the reading things. I mean, this whole reflections thing I'm doing right now is just because I'm feeling a frustration, and that I feel like it's time to talk about, as opposed to, if you watched any of the videos I made from the first book of Being Nobody Going Nowhere, and as you've seen in this book, I will read something and laugh, or read something and cry, that I'm having great reactions to reading this stuff, and sometimes the laughing is with disdain, and sometimes the laughing is with usually the laughing's not with disdain. Usually it's not scoffing. Usually the laughing is like, oh my god, that's so fucking perfect. Great metaphors. So many great metaphors in spiritual writing. But that gets to the other thing I wanted to talk about, is the writing thing, is that I have often had this, I have to examine, like, I'm a writer, I wanted to be a writer, and so now I'm a writer, and I write all the time, and I write obsessively. I write more than I read. I've often in my life thought that writing is bad for me, that it allows me to indulge in my obsessions and tell stories over and over to myself in the worst possible way, because I don't have to worry about hurting a person. I'm not talking to a person. Like right now, I'm not talking to a person. I'm just talking into the internet. My friend Lewis might be watching this because he watched the one last night and sent me an email responding saying maybe we should have a discourse in YouTube videos, which would be interesting because, again, that potentially allows other people to listen in and benefit from the conversation, which is really, I'm doing this because I make a lot more sense to myself when I'm talking or writing. So I'm talking to you, whoever would be watching this, but really I'm just talking to myself in front of a camera with a microphone, which is less crazy, possibly, than talking to oneself alone in the room. But that's what I do with all my writing anyway, it's just talking to myself. And we live in this time frame right now when everybody can talk to everybody through the internet, and people just like it and don't listen, or they sometimes listen and sometimes are affected by it. And I've learned that from my years of blogging, that sometimes you greatly affect people that never comment and never say anything, and it really touches them and helps their lives. So it's important to share our journey and our struggle and our thoughts and our inner world with the outer world. That's why I do what I do. But I often think it's bad for me. And what I mean by that is that it's perpetuating my bullshit machine as opposed to purifying me, as opposed to creating something beautiful, which was what my initial intention of being a writer was to create something beautiful and painful and gorgeous and teaching and all those things. And what it has been over the years is this constant churning, chewing a cud. I don't know. I mean, there's been some beauty. I've made some beauty, but it's also sifted with pocket lint and sand and twigs and fragments of hearts. Shards of mind, shards of God, shards of soul, fragments. So that this project, which was supposed to be, I don't know, I mean, I've been doing this birthday project since I was 23, but really only in the last 9 years of living in New York, I've been doing this birthday project of posting a picture every day. I had started at my 23rd birthday, but I didn't actually keep it up because I didn't have a digital camera at the time. I was kind of requiring my friend Kwai to take pictures of me, and it didn't actually follow through, but that was the inception of the idea. And living in New York and having technology enough to do it at that point, starting in 2007, I started taking a picture of myself every day, but I used to blog back then, so I didn't do the same kind of birthday writing. I think I was writing every day, but I don't remember. I haven't actually looked through. It's all there somewhere. But I do know that there was a specific choice a few years ago of being like, I don't want to just chronologue anymore. I want to make writing projects because I'm tired of chronologuing. My life is not interesting to me right now. Just the everyday, the mundane. I'll just share with you, I was just touched or saddened by that word mundane, which has been kind of haunting me the last couple days, because I met a guy a few months ago who I perceive as crazy, and most of my friends are kind of crazy and I'm crazy, so there's nothing wrong with crazy. The difficulty with crazy is that if you, crazy is where you allow yourself to believe in your internal world just as much or more than the external world that is forcing itself upon us. And I think that that's what makes a lot of beautiful things in the world, is people who believe in their internal world more or just as much as the external world and bring some of it through. And the downside of that is that when your internal world has lots of poison in it, as this man's does, and a lot of us do, I mean, mine certainly does too, but with him, it was really out of control. And he has not suffered enough dukkha. He's suffered a fuckload of dukkha more than I have. Maybe in a different level. He's not as intelligent about it. He's very honest about that he's like, I'm not as intelligent and I do things. But he hasn't woken up or wanted to wake up about his suffering. I don't need to talk all about him, I'm sorry, but the reason I brought it up was that he was just like, yeah, I really want to do the mundane with you. And I was like, that's how you get through the days. You do the mundane, letting the days go by. That was his mantra at the time. Um, so it makes me feel bad, but I was like, yeah, can I do the mundane with someone? Can I do the mundane with this person? I couldn't do the mundane with that person. There was too much like drugs and drama. And although I've done a lot of drugs in my life, it was with I've always done it with a reservation of knowing that it's something I'm attempting, not something I'm living with. And he's living with a lot of drugs, and that's just not possible for me to live with. But I feel guilty that I tried to. I tested out. That's what I was doing. I was like, can I? Can I live the mundane with you? Can we do the mundane? And you can't test out doing the mundane. It's actually, that's, a double bed and a stalwart lover for sure, as Morrissey said. Anyway, I didn't get it. And he was very, very, very hurt in the process. He hurt himself a lot more than I hurt him. But I was the altar on which he broke his soul, so it made me feel bad. I got derailed. I'm very easily derailed, forgive me. The writing thing is that I fear that this writing project that I came up with, which was meant to be about detailing ego constructs, things that I believe about myself. It started with a concept of the illusory nature of them and how I wanted to detail them just as something to do, as the birthday project, as the writing project. And I don't know if this is why, or if time is why, or if reasons are why, or if Mercury retrograde is why, or Mars retrograde, or the springtime, or whatever. But I stopped meditating and got really obsessed with the writing. The writing became primary, whereas the meditation was primary, and the meditation takes a lot of time. 1 or 2 hours a day is a lot of time. The writing also takes 1 or 2 hours a day, and it's frustrating. It brings up a lot of emotions. It brings up lots of confusion, pockets of ignorance, fear, hurt. It's delving in the past, and all of that is completely opposite to the training of being in the present and being in the now, which is what the meditation's about, of learning how to not react. Like, the writing process is about dredging up, imagining, and reacting, and documenting that experience in poetic form. And again, I know that a lot of people have been commenting about how useful it is for them, or beautiful it is for them, or brings them joy, or whatever. So I know that there is a benefit. But like, one of the things she talks about in the thing I just read was how if you choose this path of releasing ignorance and becoming enlightened, or realizing the Four Noble Truths, then you have to be willing to renounce a lot of the things that have supported and nourished you, the people that have been in your life. Doesn't mean you need to be an asshole to them. You just stop being attached to them, and you stop giving them energy. And so it's again bringing back into, and maybe that means the writing project is doing what it's supposed to do. It's bringing into high contrast, like, this ego construct. And I haven't written the I am a writer, which is one of the things I have to write. I don't even know what I'm going to write tonight. It's already almost midnight, so I have to examine. I've been taking a picture of myself, and I have to examine my ego construct that I'm going to write tonight. But that I am a writer, I'm a talker, I'm somebody who puts things into words, I'm somebody who thinks, I'm somebody who experiences the world by expressing it. I'm an ecstatic. I'm a mystic. I experience the world by expressing it. And the world is just suffering and impermanence, and so my expression is so often suffering, imperfection, And I know in this experience of trying to love someone last year, he kept harping on me about my words. And he'd be like, "Oh, but you said that, and you know what that means, and I'm afraid of your anger." And whereas I felt like I have nurtured in myself a freedom over many years to just say shit as a way of working out understandings of things, I was made to feel shameful about that. As if what I was doing is dangerous, which it is. And I've long believed that life is dangerous, so that's just become like an acceptance for me. Like, oh, life is dangerous, so whatever I do is going to be dangerous, and that's okay because life is dangerous, and if you're living, you're going to get cuts on your hands and bruises on your shins, and that's just life. And occasionally you're going to die. Get some broken bones. If you're living. Now, if you're safe, then you're not really living so much, but you sure are safe. Well, you just sit tight, hiding out from life. Oh, you cannot put the world to rights, but you could stop being wrong tonight. So anyway, I doubt everything. I'm also a doubter. So I don't know if what I'm doing is the right thing, except I just have to accept that I am on my path, and it is my path, and eventually I have to renounce that. Why do you not renounce? You don't renounce the Buddha? And then in the renunciant path, you have to keep the Buddha, you have to keep the path. You're like, well, don't I have to renounce everything or renounce the path too? Renounce Buddha. I'm silly. I like being silly. I'm sorry. I'm crazy. That's it. At least twice as long as what I read from the book, so I'll read another chapter and then do some writing. Oh, Buddha. Buddha, why is it so hard?